In today's video, we're going to take a look back to the 2010 NHL Entry Draft. And we're going to take a look at how all these guys have done, and we're going to do a redraft on who would be the top 10 if we were redrafting these players today. And that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. Alright, so as I mentioned off the top, we're going back 8 years and taking a look at the 2010 NHL Entry Draft, and we're going to do a redraft of the top 10 players to see who would be the top 10 picks if we could go back in hindsight here and look back at these players if we knew what they were going to accomplish throughout the early part of their NHL careers. Obviously, a good chunk of these guys are well-established NHLers now, so we should be able to get a good feel for how they're going to finish out their careers. So some of these guys might surprise you. There's a few of them in the top 10 that are going to remain the same, but probably change positioning. So let's take a look here. Let's jump in, and feel free to leave some comments down below and let me know how you'd rank these players if you were redrafting the 2010 NHL Draft. Let's get started. Number 10. The original pick was held by the New York Rangers. They selected Dylan Mcllwrath, who unfortunately hasn't really amounted to much of anything in the NHL. Now, if I were redrafting, I would select Cam Fowler. Cam Fowler's had a pretty good, solid career so far for the Anaheim Ducks. He was originally drafted number 12, so not too far down from where we have him today. But as we know, Cam Fowler's been a very solid defensive player for the Anaheim Ducks, and certainly significantly better than what the Rangers ended up selecting with Dylan Mcllwrath. The number 9 pick in the 2010 NHL Draft was Mikael Granlund, the Minnesota Wild, and actually the way we have them ranked, he actually would stay there at number 9. No big surprise there. Granlund's had a pretty solid career for the Minnesota Wild and is certainly one of the top 10 players from that draft class, so we didn't feel there was any need to change the positioning on the number 9 spot. Number 8 was held by the Atlanta Thrashers, which are now the Winnipeg Jets. They selected at that point Alex Burmistrov. Right now, we'd have them selecting Jaden Schwartz, who was originally went at number 14. What an upgrade that would be if they had Jaden Schwartz in their lineup. Can you imagine adding Schwartz to that Jets lineup? Actually, the way he plays, I think he would fit in quite well over there in Winnipeg, and certainly would change the look of their team. Number 7 pick belonged to the Carolina Hurricanes. We originally had selected Jeff Skinner. Now, we are redoing this draft. Now, Jeff Skinner's had a pretty good career, and he's still in his top 10. We've actually moved him up here slightly, but the new number 7 pick would be Mark Stone, who was taken by the Ottawa Senators at number 178. What a steal that was. Can you imagine Mark Stone with 178 and turned out to be the player he is today? He's obviously a great two-way forward, pretty solid 25 goal scorer, leads the league in steals for the last number of years. Probably been the Ottawa Senators' best forward, you could argue, over this year and last. So certainly quite a steal at that point for the Ottawa Senators. We were redrafting, we put him at number 7. The number 6 spot belonged to the Tampa Bay Lightning, and they selected forward Brett Connolly. If we were redoing this draft today, we would have them selecting Evgeni Kuznetsov, who obviously went to the Washington Capitals later in the first round at number 26. Obviously, Kuznetsov has had a very fantastic offensive career so far and certainly deserves to be in the top 10 instead of a later round first round pick. The number 5 spot belonged to the New York Islanders, who they selected Nino Niederreiter. Now, Niederreiter's had a pretty decent career. We would still have him in the first round, but we would rank him below the top 10 here. I'd probably have him somewhere between 12 to 15. Maybe even a little bit lower, but certainly in the first round for sure. Niederreiter went number 5, and we would now have them selecting Jeff Skinner. I think Jeff Skinner's he jumped into the NHL right away. He's been a very solid goal scorer for the Hurricanes, so we'd have him going to the Islanders at number 5. Number 4 was held by the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they selected center Ryan Johansen. Well, obviously, Ryan Johansen's been a very productive player in his career, and we'd actually will leave him there at number 4. We would not change this pick. He's one of a couple of picks that stayed the same in his first top 10 round of the 2010 draft. Johansen is probably the 4th most productive player so far to come out of this draft, so we would leave that one where it is. Number 3 was held by the Florida Panthers, and they selected defenseman Erik Gudbranson, who currently plays for the Vancouver Canucks. Obviously, Gudbranson's been a decent, serviceable defenseman so far in the NHL, but certainly not worthy of a top 3 pick. Probably, if things would have been, you could predict the future, he'd probably end up being probably a 2nd round pick. I don't think he'd make it in the first round. There's a lot of pretty decent talented players that came out of this draft. I mean, if he was in the first round, no later than a late first round, definitely not a number 3 pick. we would have the Florida Panthers instead selecting sniper Vladimir Tarasenko, who currently plays for the St. Louis Blues and ended up going at number 16. Can you imagine if the Panthers would have had Tarasenko the last number of years? Boy, would that have changed things quite a bit for the Panthers' fortunes for sure. Now, obviously, as we all remember, if you can remember back, if you were a hockey fan back in 2010, the whole big question going into this draft was who was number one? It was always Taylor versus Tyler was the big thing. Was it going to be Hall or Seguin? They were the clear-cut top two prospects for this draft, and there was a lot of debate. They ended up going Taylor Hall first to the Edmonton Oilers and Tyler Seguin number 2 to the Boston Bruins. Now, the other thing that I find odd about this is a little bit of an anomaly as well, is that both of these guys have been traded, even though they've had very reasonably productive careers. I mean, they've been putting up really good offensive numbers for the respective teams, but yet they both ended up getting traded from their original drafted team. Not something you see all the time, that the top two players in a draft, especially within a short span of 7-8 years, both get traded. Now, obviously, Hall went 1, Seguin went 2, and personally, if I were to be doing this draft, I would take Tyler Seguin at number 1. As much as Taylor Hall's having a fantastic Hart Trophy candidate-worthy season this year, I think Tyler Seguin's had the better career so far. And if I could look into a crystal ball, I would, back then in 2010 when I was doing this draft, I would have selected Tyler Seguin at number 1, Taylor Hall at number 2. Seguin does have more points, and I think he's been a lot more consistent player throughout his career. You could argue as well, it kind of depends upon too what teams they were playing for. But obviously both of these guys ended up getting traded, which I said it's a little bit strange. Not something you see every time. Very often the top 2 picks in a draft who both had productive careers both get traded. So there's my top 10 picks. Now a couple other players notable here that would probably go in the first round as well that may not have been drafted so high when the draft actually took place 8 years ago. We saw Brendan Gallagher go at 147. Obviously he'd go a lot higher today. We saw Tyler Toffoli go at number 47. He would definitely be a first-round pick now, I believe. Defenseman John Klingberg, who I would probably put just outside of this top 10. You could probably even argue he should be in the top 10. It was a tough choice for me not to include him. He was drafted at 131. And another guy, Justin Falk, who's been a tremendous defenseman for Carolina, was drafted 37th. So there's some other later round picks that turned out to be great NHLers. So it just goes to show when you're doing these drafts that obviously sometimes it's a little bit of a gamble, and things don't always work out the way that you plan for. Some guys end up being a bust, and then you get the late round steals as well. It certainly goes both ways. So leave some comments down below. If you were doing the top 10 for this draft and you were doing a redraft like I just did, how would you rank these players? Do you agree with my rankings, or would you maybe rank them differently? Either way is fine. Leave some comments down below and let me know who you think would go in the top 10 picks. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams. There's plenty of content here for all fan bases to enjoy, so certainly consider subscribing if you're new. If you haven't done so already, consider checking us out on social media. You're going to find our Twitter handle on the screen right here. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and all those accounts are linked down below in the description. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.